Thank you. So before I start, I just want to say thank you to Belinda in terms of this 2 days, because I've been talking to lots of people throughout the 2 days, and I feel that I feel loved. I feel like I've had some really great conversations with a lot of people, and certainly the next 3 days where we defrag from this 2 days of intensive information, that there'll be a lot of people that I'll be in touch with, and actually will enrich the work that I do as well. And I'm sure that we all feel the same way. So thanks, Belinda. Golf clap. Well done. So I'm going to start with a story. So apologies to those that I've spoken to throughout the 2 days, because you probably heard this already. But my daughter has got significant mental health issues that have come from trauma in the transition from primary school to secondary school. And there's a number of things that have happened during that period of time. And we've tried all sorts. So we have tried talking therapies. We've tried just about every combination of medication on the planet. And what typically happens is one of those medications led to complications that required another medication that required another one. So you end up on this merry-go-round being pushed from pillar to post by GPs, thinking that actually this is going to help, and it doesn't. It makes things worse. So on this one occasion, she tried to take her own life several times, which is obviously, as a parent, is pretty heartbreaking. And what I used to do is I used to get her in the car, take her to hospital, and what we'd do is we'd basically put her in a ward where she felt secure. So that's shoelaces and everything, take it away from her. And then on this one occasion, I thought, nothing's going to change if all we keep doing is wrapping her in this cotton wool and putting her in this ward to deal with it. So I took her in the car, and 40 minutes later, we were in the Lake District. Took her up to a place called Sale Fell. So those of you that know the Lake District, it's a tiny little bump of a hill at the top of Keswick, looking down Bassenthwaite, Derwent Water. You've got Skiddaw on your left, you've got the Lawton Fells on your right, and it's just a beautiful sort of picture, and on a good day you can see Scotland as well. And I remember getting to the top of it with her, just walking along, didn't really say too much, just chilling really. And we got to the top, and she said, "You know what?" I said, I know I've got a lot going on in my life, but the one thing, no matter what happens in my life, I've always got this." And that was a breakthrough for us, a massive breakthrough, that the outdoors is the perfect vehicle for her to feel safe. So that safety is really important to us. And we did a few, I'm a scientist, so we did a few measurements every time we went up to the Lake District. And we drive from, we live in Cheshire, and my parents live in north of Preston, which is where we were this last time. When we get to the Trough of Bowland and we look on the right-hand side, we wave to Grandma and Grandad, and our heart rate drops. And then we keep going, and we get into the Lake District, and we'll drive over, we'll get to Windermere, and we'll see the lake on the left, and our heart rate drops. And I look at the brain, I suppose, like a jukebox. And for those of the cool kids in the room, an MP3 player or whatever you want to call it, it's a little bit like playing the right record at the right volume. And if you can control those two variables, then I think you're in a really good position to manipulate somebody's mental health, making sure that they're playing the right record at the right volume, which is obviously related to thinking the right stuff and having the right level of arousal to do that. Well, we knew that we could reduce her arousal, but the problem was she was still playing the wrong record. And this is where you come in as a profession, both as your mountain leaders, your walking leaders, your therapists, and those people that have aspirations of combining the two. For me, you are such an important part of the future for those people that do have mental health issues, in my opinion. And all we need to do is try and work together to try and increase access and make sure that we give those children the opportunity to get into those spaces and make a real difference. And it's been a pleasure, Stefan, to talk to you for the 2 days. It's been really good. And Abby, I had a good chat with you as well. So I've got hope actually from this 2 days that we will make a big difference to those kids. So anyway, why I'm here to talk about social prescribing, not about my child. But I thought it's quite important because there's a lot of parents out there that be feeling exactly the same way, and there is a way of managing this problem. So if we look at it in relation to the outdoors, there's three things. The first one, who knew that you could actually immerse yourself in a forest, put ear defenders on, and sort of eye blockers so you can't see anything, and you'll get the benefit of being in that forest space. So this thing called Shinrin-yoku, which is a Japanese term called forest bathing in English, where you just immerse yourself in that environment, and the chemicals that are coming off from the plant life has an impact on inflammation. So it reduces the inflammation in the body. Now, inflammation is the cause of most of the physiological diseases that we're aware of, as well as some of the mental health issues as well, like things like cortisol. So it actually reduces the level of cortisol and it decreases the level of those inflammatory products that are produced in our bodies that can lead to things like cardiovascular disease and cancer. So actually just putting yourself in an outdoor space is already having a positive impact on your health. So again, if we look at it from the point of view of we want to improve our health, put yourself in an outdoor space. And the second thing is this concept of cognitive interpretation of the world that we're in. So everybody's probably heard of things like mindfulness. It's not for everybody, but it's one technique that's really useful to just recognize what's going on in your little world. And that example that I gave of my daughter, standing on top of a hill looking at a beautiful scene, it was one of those moments where the angels must have been aligned because there was crepuscular rays going into battle. Beautiful. But actually that had a real massive, meaningful impact on my daughter at that particular moment. And we're all experienced in the outdoors, and we've all had those moments. You know, I have those moments even in a clagged in day. It's lovely. You know, just being in your own little bubble, your own little space. So that cognitive interpretation is really, really important as well. And finding ways to how can we reinterpret the world around us and put ourselves in those spaces that make us feel better. And the final one is the other real benefit that we get from being in the outdoors is this physical activity. Now, if we look at the research in those three areas, there's an awful lot of research around physical activity and the benefits to our physical and mental health, and probably a little bit less on forest bathing in particular, and that immersion in a lovely outdoor environment. And there's quite a bit around cognitive interpretation. But again, if we're all sat in this room thinking, well, all the evidence is out there, all we need to do is change now. Well, I don't believe that for one second. Those of you who are in the room that are academics will understand that it's not 10 papers that's going to change the world, it's thousands. And if we can provide overwhelming evidence to support these things, then that's going to increase the likelihood of policy change. Because I've been chatting with Helen, I think I've bored her to death, about schools and about what goes on in primary schools and what goes on in secondary schools. That game that was played in that clip is banned in primary schools. You can't do it. You know, we've become risk averse to the point where we're not allowing our children to actually engage in risk. And I think there is a knock-on effect in terms of the little micro-traumas that we can create for children will eventually lead to resilience. And if we take those opportunities for micro-traumas away, then I think we do have issues. So that's just giving a bit of an overview, really, in terms of, again, hope. These things we know will have a massive impact on people's health. We could also look at that on a timeline as well, in terms of prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation. So the outdoors is a fantastic vehicle to improve people's mental health before it becomes an issue, and physical health. And similarly, it's a fantastic treatment, and it's a fantastic form of rehabilitation. We know this, and again, there's an awful lot of evidence out there, but we need more. We need more. Now, the beauty of social prescribing, and we'll talk more about what social prescribing actually is in a moment, because the expert is here. Sam's much more expert than myself, is that it's not just a treatment. Social prescription gives you the impression that you go to a doctor and the doctor will prescribe you something. That's one avenue of social prescription. But actually, the steps before that, if you feel that you're on a slippery slope or you feel that you're not particularly well, there are mechanisms to prevent you from becoming really ill through social prescription. Okay, and we'll talk about those mechanisms in a moment. So I'm not going to read off the slide, so if you want to have a look at that. So this is a definition from the King's Fund about what social prescribing is. And apologies for all the writing, but it's a definition, isn't it? Now, as you're reading that, one of the challenges is that when you go to a doctor, I'll talk from a traditional sense. You go to a doctor and you say, "I'm pre-hypertensive," which means I've got high blood pressure. All right. So I go there and say I have high blood pressure. The normal reaction from a typical GP would be, "Well, there's some drugs for that," and they'll prescribe you the drugs, give you the drugs, and start a cycle of no change. So ultimately, you stay on those drugs. You don't make any permanent change or positive change to your behaviors that's led to you being pre-hypertensive in the first place. All right, and that's very typical of our NHS. Typically, what I believe about social prescribing, and I'll say this now before Sam provides a bit more of the details of social prescribing, is that this is a potential vehicle to save the NHS. Because ideally, if we can prescribe somebody some behavior change, if we can prescribe somebody a way of manipulating the way that they think and manipulating the way that they feel, through changes to their routines and changes to their lifestyles, then that's creating some sustainability. And it means that they won't turn up at the doctors again, which means the waiting list for doctors goes down, which means the trips to hospitals reduce because they don't need the surgeries anymore and they don't need the significant intervention that would happen if you carry on a journey. Yeah. So social prescribing is a vehicle to utilize the community and utilize other people, other professionals, such as yourself, to bring about that positive permanent change in behaviors that will lead to better health in the future. Okay? On that note, I'm going to sit down and let Sam talk a little bit more about the details.
Thanks, Bryan. Hi, everybody. Lovely to meet you today. I think we've both spoken to quite a few of you. My name's Sam Pywell. I'm an occupational therapist by background. I don't know if there's any of you hiding in the audience. I've already met one student. Yeah, I knew there was going to be more than one. Lovely to see you guys. It's actually OT week, isn't it, this week? So it's a little bit exciting for us. And I'm saying that because there's more than one type of social prescriber. Okay, so traditional models of social prescription tend to talk about a link worker that's based in a GP surgery, just as Bryan's mentioned, that works with individuals. The GP might see someone who is depressed or lonely. They'll say, well, there's sort of a limit as to what medication can affect. How about you go and see our link worker next door? Okay, so a link worker is one type of social prescriber, but an allied health professional is another, and your AHP group of colleagues is actually quite big. I don't know if there's any of those colleagues here today, any physiotherapists, paramedics, pharmacists. I can't remember the full list of all 14, but ODPs as well, yeah, I should have remembered that one. Occupational therapists. So there's actually a whole group of us that through the RSPH, so the Royal Society for Public Health in 2019, wrote a framework about social prescribing. So if you've not looked that up as an AHP, please do. In terms of commissioners and managers, I don't know if there's any NHSy people here. Just give me a little bit of a wink from a distance. NHS, social care colleagues, academics, managers, leaders of outdoor provision, anybody working with schools. Okay, believe it or not, we are all part of a social prescribing ecosystem. Okay, so whether you're in the workplace or at home, you as a person, you're part of this social prescribing ecosystem. And to me, it's one of the closest things that actually represents true health and what makes you well. So to understand social prescribing, I've had to, our profession, we're reflectors, aren't we? We sit there reflecting and talking to a lot of people about what we think. It's a lot about what makes you well and what makes the people that you're working with well. Okay. People can have a lot of barriers and a lot of challenges before they even get to you. Yeah, I don't know if you want to shout out a couple of challenges that people face. So before they even get into a system, to an appointment within the NHS, or perhaps to an outdoor centre, or to, going on a hike, going on a walk, an expedition. Just name one barrier somebody could have in their life. Stigma, anxiety. Yes. Yeah. So many barriers, financial barriers. They could have domestic abuse. They could be living in an environment where there's domestic abuse. So there can be many barriers before somebody literally puts on their rucksack. The rucksack could be weighed down effectively with bricks. Somebody might have slashed their handles. Okay. So the people that all of us can work with in the community can face things like health inequalities and health inequities. And this sort of language is really important to get to grips with, because these are basically the barriers that people face. And being able to demonstrate that the work that you're doing does actually tackle some of these barriers is quite important. We know that the barriers that people face, it can really impact people's health and well-being. Okay, you can look at a variety of statistics and it will say the poorer somebody is, so the less income somebody has, whether somebody's a carer, whether they live in an area of high deprivation, all those factors understandably impact somebody's health and well-being. So how do we get them to access the outdoors? How do we get them to access, bushcraft? Caspian did a fantastic bushcraft session. I don't know if Caspian's still here at all. He's, got half the room firelighting. I don't know if anybody's just been in that session. But how do we get people who actually really need that to see yourselves? How do we get people to engage? Okay, so many, many barriers that people can face. One of the barriers, I think, is actually understanding of terminology. So as a social prescribing unit coordinator based in a university, one of the questions I keep getting asked is, how do we fund our group? Okay, so community voluntary faith sector groups, small enterprises. So I don't know if anybody's here from a charity or a voluntary group that you run in. Yep, I know because I've spoken to you guys. Yeah, a couple of colleagues here, okay. And that is something that connects quite a few people. So they might actually refer an individual on to a charity for additional weird and wonderful support that you guys do. Okay, if that's in the outdoors, if that's in nature, so whether you're fortunate enough to be like a Caspian speech and language therapist, so one of my AHP colleagues, based in the forest, delivering bushcraft sessions to, I think he was talking about individuals with autism, and loads of other client groups as well, or whether you're on you're working with people with spinal injuries and working on top of a mountain, trying to get them up in the wheelchairs. You're outside in nature. And if you go to NHS guidance and NHS policy, and you look at where social prescribing has all come from, you can find a definition about social prescribing in the outdoors, and it's called green social prescribing. Okay. This is through the personalised care framework. And this is, it's really, I can't tell you how much language is important. So particularly if you're thinking about getting commissioned, you want to have that dialogue with universities, you want to have that dialogue, say, with the NHS or other organisations. It's I don't know about you, I do think there's just so many language barriers to this as well. So understanding that you're actually delivering an intervention out in nature, it can be referred to as green social prescribing. There is blue social prescribing as well, but I have a little bit of a problem with that. Blue social prescribing is meant to be in or near water. Okay, but how do you separate the trees away from the sides of the lake? It's a little bit difficult, isn't it? So is it green? Is it blue? Is it blue-green? So understanding contemporary language around social prescribing and understanding where you fit in this ecosystem. And a lot of people that I speak to don't understand that they are actually a destination provider of social prescribing. Okay. So all those lovely allied health professionals, all your medical colleagues, GPs, link workers, we refer on to individuals like yourselves, so colleagues working in the community with individuals in the outdoors. You become a destination provider of social prescribing. Okay, so the link worker based in the GP surgery, just as one example, they are effectively like a travel agent. Now, I don't know when the last time was that you actually visited a face-to-face travel agent. Oh, yeah, I'm cracking on now. I'm like 40, so maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that, travel agents. So your link workers are like your travel agent based in your GP surgery. And what the idea is that they're meant to know all the best destinations in the community. Okay, all the places that are going to help make you well. You need to get known by the link workers for them to refer onto yourselves. onto things like bushcraft, mountaineering, walking, whatever it is that you provide. Okay, and there are a variety of platforms out there that they are starting to use. So they're starting to use things like Elemental. I got quizzed about digital platforms. So there's Elemental, Joy, Treacle, but there's also databases in organisations as well. So places like your local CVS. So I don't know if you have a CVS or a Citizens Advice or a CAB in your community, but have you ever thought of talking to them and telling them what you do? Yeah, it's like I say, the ecosystem's massive, but if we don't communicate what we can provide, it's people at the end of the system that can miss out. Okay, so this is an example written by Husk and colleagues. Karen Husk's a professor at, I think it's Plymouth University, and they wrote about the different models of social prescribing just from an NHS point of view. So this is just what I've talked to you about. So it's about referral on from a GP surgery, possibly via a link worker to an activity or a destination provider of social prescribing, which for me, in my head as a previous outdoor ed instructor, is something in the outdoors. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So Belinda asked us to focus on what you guys could take away from this conference, and what I really hoped you can take away is a bit of a practical guide on what you can actually do. So it doesn't matter if you're completely new to social prescribing, or if, like Caspian, you're quite familiar with social prescribing, you identify as a destination provider. This infographic, which I've placed on the Facebook feed for the conference, has a lot of hyperlinks in it. So it gives you questions like, I lead groups in the outdoors, so what should I do? Well, why not add that you're a destination provider of social prescribing to your website? So especially if you're thinking of getting commissions, add in that language. Yeah, you can add it yourself. Yeah, you can add it yourself. Okay. Further down a bit's about the evidence base. So obviously as a university, we do research, we look into the evidence base, and we get involved in having conversations with community volunteering faith sector groups about, well, I don't really understand the evidence base supporting my work. So it's really good to have that conversation with your university, with us, with colleagues at the National Academy of Social Prescribing, just to add that to your websites, to your social media as well. So what's the evidence base? We've heard a lot of it here today and yesterday as well. What's the evidence base connecting? You're making improvements to people's health and well-being. Well, how? Okay, and that's where we start to enter territory about outcomes. And in social prescribing, variety of outcome measures. Again, I know academics, you're going to love this. Not all of us love it. I keep not identifying with being an academic. I do apologise. This is the dean of my faculty. Yeah, loads of different outcome measures, and we have things like the ONS4. I think WhenWebs was actually mentioned in an earlier presentation. There's a children and young people's version as well. So there's a variety of outcome measures, and it might be possible to actually ask your local link worker what outcome measures they're using and possibly work together, okay, to measure and capture the impact you're making. So this is NASP, the National Academy, apologies for the typo, of Social Prescribers, and they're really dedicated to the advancement of social prescribing. And social prescribing does look differently in different areas. It looks differently per profession. So you can have somebody being referred for art, for music. I know a colleague was working on a telephone music project. But there's also projects where people work together from non-traditional backgrounds. So in our area, in terms of best practice, there was a Phoenix Rising project that was funded where it included nature-based interventions, but also working with a local artist. So doing some art outdoors, doing bushcraft, doing walks for mental well-being, and their referral pathway, they'd get referrals from a local mental health service. So they had a clear pathway from mental health through to themselves. This is us. This is our last slide. So, Social Prescribing Unit, and we have an event on the 16th of June next year. We hosted our outdoor conference this year. I think a couple of colleagues have you've been to this. We host a variety of knowledge exchange spaces. So we host monthly seminars. We've got one tomorrow. Everything's on Eventbrite, and it's actually on green social prescribing tomorrow. So it's a really good one to dial into. You just book on Eventbrite. Follow us on Twitter. We have quite a community emerging on Twitter, and one of my colleagues has just set up a research group specific to the outdoors and social prescribing. So if you do want to get involved in that, please contact us. That's an open group to collaborate on research. So I hope that's okay. And that's about it. Thank you. Okay.